This was one of the strangest 4th of Julys this country has ever had. And I want to walk you through it because the split screen here is wild. Let's back up to Thursday night first, because this is where the tone for the whole weekend got set. At Mount Rushmore, the president gave a half-hour speech branding progressive Democrats the enemy of July 4th, 1776, trying his invented communist threat directly to immigrants and telling the crowd he wants Congress to nuke the filibuster to pass something called the Save America Act. His pitch for why? Do that and Republicans won't lose an election for 100 years. Sit with that for a second. The argument for ending the filibuster was explicitly that it would end competitive elections. That's not a paraphrase of the vibe. That's the stated goal. Then at 2:11 in the morning, hours after the speech, the president was apparently still awake and decided the best use of his time was posting a side-by-side of Georgia Senator Jon Ossoff next to Pee Wee Herman. 8 minutes later, a second post. Texas Senate candidate James Tellerico, a photo edited to look like he's missing a tooth, next to Alfred E. Newman from Mad Magazine. No caption, just that. On the morning the country turned 250. Meanwhile, down on the National Mall, the actual celebration was falling apart in real time. And not because of politics, because of the heat. The Great American State Fair, part of the administration's official Freedom 250 lineup, had to shut its gates Friday after D.C. Fire and EMS logged 44 patient contacts, 11 hospitalizations, and 7 people on advanced life support in triple-digit heat. Then Saturday, severe thunderstorms rolled in and forced an actual evacuation of the mall. Thousands of people shuffled into shelters for 2 hours, which is why the president's big speech didn't start until after 11:15 p.m. Not exactly the unifying, on-schedule 250th birthday moment that was promised. And the heat wasn't just a D.C. problem. It nearly broke the grid. PJM interconnection, which powers 67 million people across 13 states plus D.C., hit demand levels chasing an all-time record set back in 2006. The Department of Energy had to issue emergency orders just to keep the lights on. The third time this year alone, DOE had to step in for PJM specifically, and wholesale electricity prices spiked to more than 60 times their normal rate. Grid operators ended up leaning on expensive backup peaker plants just to avoid outages. Now, here's the part that should embarrass somebody. Energy Secretary Chris Wright had spent this entire year touring the country arguing that wind and solar don't really count because they're not guaranteed to be producing at the exact moment demand's peak. Fine, that's a real engineering conversation to have, but it's a strange argument to keep making while your own department is issuing emergency orders because the grid you're overwhelmingly stocking with fossil and nuclear can't keep up with a heat wave. And you can't spend the year insisting renewables add nothing to the grid and then act surprised when the grid you built without them starts buckling the first time everyone turns their AC on at once. Now, let's go somewhere the cable coverage barely touched today, Tehran. While Americans were watching fireworks, Iran kicked off a multi-day state funeral for Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, killed back in February alongside several family members in the U.S.-Israeli strikes that opened this war. Now, we're talking crowds estimated in the millions. Mourners beating their chest and chanting for revenge, and foreign delegations flying in from Russia, Iraq, Pakistan, and Hamas. Notably absent, pretty much every Western government. That absence is its own headline. In the Strait of Hormuz, a route that used to carry roughly a fifth of the world's oil and LNG, is still effectively shut down months later, with Iran's IRGC continuing to dictate which routes tankers are allowed to use and turning back or striking the ones that don't comply. Now, the night before at Rushmore, the president said the fighting would resume once the funeral rites were finished. Now, back home, this war has gotten expensive and unpopular enough that the Senate actually passed a war powers resolution, rebuking the president over it. The first one to succeed after several failed attempts, even as the Pentagon confirmed the $67 billion supplemental funding request tied to the conflict. Now, the president is expected to veto the resolution. So that's where things are standing geopolitically while the cake's getting cut here. Back on the money side, this is a three-part story. First, fresh data from the analytics firm Nansen shows nearly 989,000 retail buyers of the president's meme coin are sitting combined losses of $3.81 billion, while the president himself has pocketed more than $1.4 billion off that same token, and a small group of early insiders walked away with another $4 billion in profit. Second, and this one gets less attention, his family's other crypto venture, World Liberty Financial, took a $187 million from the UAE just before he was sworn in. A Trump-linked entity is guaranteed a cut of every token sale, regardless of whether the price goes up or down. That's not really investing. That's a toll booth with his name on it. Third, a Belgian diamond trade group, the same one that got its U.S. tariff zeroed out last year, presented him with a diamond and golden ring shaped around a Superman logo, engraved on the inside with his own name on it. Add that to a $400 million jet gifted by Qatar, and you start to see a pattern of who's cashing in on this presidency and who isn't. Also happening in Washington today, a march by Patriot Front, several hundred masked members of the group, which the ADL and extremism researchers at George Washington University both classify as white nationalists. They paraded near Union Station and the Capitol on the actual anniversary of independence, carrying Confederate flags and inverted American flags while chanting about reclaiming the country. One researcher who studies the group pointed out that its shield logo borrows visual language from Mussolini's fascist party symbol of the 1920s and 1930s, which is a hell of a detail to sit on Independence Day. Now, D.C. police confirmed no arrests, calling it protected First Amendment activity. Draw your own conclusions about the optics of that happening on America's 250th. Now, two different reactions to all of this are worth reading side by side. Senator Bernie Sanders posted plainly that this administration isn't America first, it's Trump first, pointing to the billion-dollar personal income and the Qatari jet. And on the other end of the tone spectrum, Pope Leo XIV, by the way, the first American-born pope, marked the day two ways. A video address to a ceremony in Philadelphia where he accepted the Liberty Medal, and then, on July 4th itself, a trip to the Italian island of Lampedusa, a main crossing point for migrants trying to reach Europe, where he held an open-air mass and released a letter to Americans focused on religious freedom and a call to welcome immigrants with compassion and generosity. Now, he didn't mention the president by name once. He didn't really have to. So that's the 250th, our birthday party running on emergency power, a war zone still technically on pause for a funeral, a meme coin that made one guy over $1 billion while wiping out nearly 1 million of his own supporters, masked marchers with fascist iconography walking past tourists on the Capitol steps, and a guy on an island off the coast of Italy saying more about American unity than most of the people actually running the country. That's what we saw today. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you want more of this, hit subscribe. We're trying to grow this channel one honest recap at a time. This is Triple M Media Network. Thanks for watching and happy 4th.